Before I begin, I want to say that all the incidents shared here are real and collected from many people. Some events may seem small, some big, and some unusual that is completely natural. I am telling the story exactly as I collected it. I am starting with the first story. This incident happened to my friend's uncle, Scott. In a small village, Uncle Scott ran a medicine shop in the local market and usually returned home by 11 p.m. But one night, after a dinner invitation at a friend's house, he was walking back alone at 1:30 a.m. Their house was at the very edge of the village. To get there, his uncle had to walk past an ancient graveyard and a massive, twisted willow tree, a tree famous for being the home of restless entity. As he walked past the graveyard, he heard a familiar voice calling his name from behind. He turned around and saw Henry, a neighbor who had died only 7 days ago. Uncle Scott was a brave man, but his blood ran cold. The entity of Henry spoke softly, "Scott, my son, do not take this path. Go another way. If you keep going, you will meet a danger you cannot escape." Before Scott could respond, Henry vanished into the mist. Thinking it was just a trick of his mind, Scott ignored the warning and kept walking. As he approached the haunted willow tree, he saw a group of figures in the distance. It looked like a funeral prayer was being held under the tree in the dead of night. But as he got closer, the figures suddenly disappeared. There were no mourners, no prayers, only a wooden funeral coffin sitting alone under the branches. Trembling, Scott walked up to the cot to see who the deceased was. He pulled back the white shroud, and what he saw was something no human is ever prepared for. Lying on the coffin, wrapped in burial cloth, was a corpse that looked exactly like him. It was his own face, cold and pale, staring back at him with lifeless eyes. Scott didn't scream. He couldn't. He ran with every ounce of strength he had left until he reached his courtyard and collapsed. The next morning, he told the family everything he had seen. Exactly 3 days later, Scott suffered a sudden heart attack and died. He was buried on the same wooden cot, under the same path he had walked that night. It seems the warning from the dead was real. Scott hadn't just seen an entity. He had seen his own destiny. Our house is an old, 3-storied building. Only our family members live here, no outsiders. My father is a tall man, over 6 feet, strong, and in his late 60s. He never believed in entity. This incident happened on the 2nd of May, 2012. I was working late on a presentation, so I was awake until around 2 a.m. Only my mother and I were home. My father was abroad for work. My mother was sleeping in her room, and the entire 3-story house was quiet. My father and I have a strange habit. We always go to the bathroom at the exact same time every night. Our bathrooms are across from each other, separated by a long corridor. And I always playfully push my father when we cross paths. That night, it was no different. As I walked towards the bathroom, I saw my father, dressed in his usual trousers, walking towards his bathroom. Following our routine, I playfully pushed him as he passed. But this time, he felt unnaturally tall, like 8 or 9 feet high. I didn't think much of it then. I went to the bathroom, and on my way back, I saw him again, walking back to his room. I went to bed, but around 3 a.m., our landline phone rang. I answered it, and a voice on the other end said, "Sweetheart, you're still awake?" My heart sank. My blood ran cold. I suddenly remembered. My father was not home. He was abroad. Who was the man I had just seen? Who did I push? I had touched something that looked exactly like my father. I didn't say anything to my father on the phone, nor did I tell my mother, who was asleep in her room. I hung up and quickly called a friend, trying to talk away the fear. A dim night light was on in my room. Then, it appeared again. To my horror, The 9-foot-tall shadow I had seen earlier was standing in the western corner of my room. Its shape was exactly like my father's. It slowly started moving towards me. I was frozen with terror. The shadow reached my bed, leaned over, and with a sudden, powerful clawing grip on my neck, it violently pulled me off the bed. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My mother rushed in, pulled me up from the floor, and wrapped me in her arms. I told her everything. That night, she slept in my room. The attacks never happened again, but the evidence of that night remains. To this day, the claw marks on my neck are still visible. I've shown them to my family, and they are a constant reminder of the night I touched a shadow. Even now, strange things happen in our house. If you visit certain remote villages in Turkish Kayaköy, you will still hear whispers about the Graveborn family, a lineage born not from the world of the living, but from the silence of the grave. The legend began 60 years ago. A pregnant woman in the village was unjustly punished during a local trial. That same night, she died of a high fever and was buried with her unborn child, 2 days after her funeral. The graveyard guard heard an impossible sound coming from her grave, the sound of bones grinding against bones. Terrified, he informed the village elders. When they arrived, they heard it too. A famous local healer was called. Under a black shroud and his strict instructions, they dug up the grave. To their absolute shock, they found a living, breathing newborn baby boy inside the casket. His mother was long dead, but he had survived. The village took care of the child, and he grew up known as the first of the grave lineage. He was a strange child. He never cried, and his skin was always cold. As he became an adult, he would spend every midnight sitting silently by his mother's grave, speaking to someone no one else could see. He eventually married and had a child of his own. But one night, the entire village woke up to that same horrific sound, bones grinding against bones. The next morning, the villagers rushed to his house. They found his wife unconscious and his child crying alone. When the wife woke up, she told a story that still haunts the village. She said that during the night, her husband's body began to twist and transform. His lower half became like that of a beast with horse-like hooves, while his upper half became something indescribable. The air in the room was filled with the heavy, suffocating scent of camphor, the smell of a dead body prepared for burial. He looked at her one last time and whispered, "My time is over. Mother is calling me home." He galloped out of the house toward the graveyard and vanished into the mist. He never returned. His wife and child stayed behind, continuing the strange grave lineage. To this day, the people of that village avoid the graveyard at night, fearing they might encounter the man who was born in a grave and eventually return to it. A few years ago, I traveled to my friend Robert's village. His grandfather was a living archive of local ghost stories. One morning, he told us to visit Robert's aunt in the next village. But before we left, his tone changed. "Be back before nightfall," he warned. "To return, you must pass the ruins of the old palace. And after sunset, that place belongs to something else." We ignored his warning. Being young and brave, we left her house late at night. We had no torch, only a mobile phone with a dying battery. The path was pitch black, surrounded by silence and empty fields. As we approached the ancient, crumbling palace, I heard something strange, the faint sound of children laughing. I asked Robert, but he heard nothing. A few steps later, Robert stopped dead. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. This time, it was the sound of a woman crying. I heard nothing. We were terrified but kept moving. Then, I looked up at the roof of the palace. My heart stopped. In the pale moonlight, I saw a figure sitting on a brilliant white horse. The rider was gesturing for us to come closer. We didn't wait. We turned and ran as fast as we could. Suddenly, we heard a rhythmic thud 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 behind us. Robert looked back and let out a blood-curdling scream. The horse was chasing us, but it had no head. A headless white horse was galloping through the dark, its phantom rider still sitting perfectly still on its back. I tripped and fell, but the fear was so great that I stood up and ran until I reached the riverbank. There, we saw a lone boatman. We begged him to take us across. In the middle of the river, Robert told him about the headless horse. The boatman didn't say a word. Instead, he began to laugh, a deep, demonic sound that echoed across the water. When we reached the other side and jumped out, we turned back to pay him. The boatman was gone. In his place sat a woman in a bright yellow frock. She stood up, called Robert's name in a hollow voice, and began to walk toward us. Robert fainted instantly. I saw the headless horse appearing again at the edge of the trees. That was the last thing I remember. The next morning, the villagers found me lying unconscious near a pond and Robert under a distant palm tree. A local healer had to give us talismans to help us recover. We later learned the dark history. Years ago, bandits had slaughtered a man and his favorite horse near that palace. Since then, the headless pair has been hunting anyone who dares to walk that path after midnight. Four years ago, I was driving a lonely stretch of highway locals called the Devil's Mile. It was around 2 a.m. I was exhausted after 3 hours of continuous driving, but I couldn't stop. I had an urgent meeting at the office the next morning. I was passing a desolate stretch of highway known locally as Dead Man's Crossing. Every driver knows this spot. It's infamous for freak accidents, brakes suddenly jamming, steering wheels locking, and drivers losing balance for no reason. The road was nearly empty. I was cruising at 80 kilometers per hour, my eyes fixed on the asphalt. Suddenly, as I rounded a sharp bend, a man appeared right in the middle of the road. He was wearing nothing but a pair of torn, dirty shorts. His face was covered in a wild, forest-like beard. As my headlights hit him, his eyes began to glisten with an unnatural light. But the most terrifying part was his smile. He was showing a row of large, rotting yellow teeth, laughing directly at my speeding car. I slammed on the brakes with all my strength, but it was too late. My car was sliding uncontrollably toward him. I closed my eyes, waiting for the sound of a bone-crushing impact and a scream of agony. Instead, I heard something that chilled my soul. Right next to my ear, a loud, manic laugh erupted. H-H-H-A. When I opened my eyes, the car had come to a stop 25 meters ahead. I had passed right through him. There was no thud, no blood, no sound of a crash. I jumped out of the car and searched the area for 10 minutes with my phone light. The road was silent. The man was gone. I spent the next week in a state of mental breakdown, convinced I had killed a man. My wife noticed my strange behavior and insisted we visit my village to relax. A few days later, we were driving back together. I was being extremely careful, keeping the speed below 50 kilometers per hour. As we reached that same cursed spot near the Devil's Mile area, my heart began to pound. Suddenly, there he was again. The same man, the same torn shorts, standing in the exact same spot. "Do you see him?" I whispered to my wife, shaking her. She took off her headphones and gasped. Where did that man come from? The moment I brought the car to a full stop, the man simply dissolved into the air, right before our eyes. My wife turned to me, her face pale with terror. Where did he go? I had no answer. Some entity don't want your prayers. They just want to see you crash while they laugh at your fear. This incident happened to an Asian couple living in America. After getting married in Isa, The husband took his new wife to the U.S. to start their life together. One evening, they went out for dinner at an open-air restaurant near a beach. On their way back, the wife complained of feeling heavy and drowsy. She claimed she felt a sudden, powerful gust of wind hit her body, even though the air was still. A few nights later, the husband woke up at 2 a.m. and found his wife missing from the bed. He searched the house and found her sitting in the pitch-black living room. She was hunched over on the sofa, her head hanging low. When he called her name, she slowly looked up and began to laugh. A deep, rhythmic laugh that grew louder and more distorted. To his horror, he saw her fist was full of raw rice. She was chewing the dry, hard grains and swallowing them while staring at him with hollow eyes. The husband tried to pull her back to the bedroom, but she resisted with unnatural strength. She whispered in a raspy voice, "I am going to leave. I will go back to where I belong." The next morning, she remembered nothing. This pattern continued for several nights. No matter how many locks he put on the doors, she would somehow find a way out to a nearby park, sitting in the dark and eating raw rice. Once, he even saw a 9-foot-tall shadow standing near her in the woods, watching them, terrified. The husband moved her to a relative's house 80 miles away, but the haunting didn't stop. While he was alone in their apartment, he heard the shower turn on and his wife's voice singing in the bathroom. Even though she was miles away, he eventually consulted a local spiritual advisor who gave him a sharp warning. "Your wife is pregnant. Certain entities are attracted to the energy of an unborn child." She was possessed that night by the beach. The husband was given a protective talisman. When he tried to put it on her, she screamed and cursed in a voice that wasn't hers. It took hours to calm her down and force her to wear it. They immediately abandoned the apartment, leaving their deposit and belongings behind. Slowly, with the help of the talisman, she returned to normal. They later confirmed she was indeed pregnant. It seems the entity wasn't just after the mother, it wanted the soul of the child. In 1979, my grandfather was serving in the police somewhere in Asia. The area where he lived, Jungle District, was a dense jungle back then, with only a few houses scattered around. One of his close friends lived there with his wife and 3 children, 2 sons and a young daughter. The daughter had a strange, troubling habit. She would sleepwalk and leave the house in the middle of the night, despite her parents locking her in their room. One night she vanished. They searched for days, but there was no sign of her. 5 days later, the grieving father was sitting on his balcony at 3 a.m., staring into the dark jungle. Suddenly, he saw a shadow moving among the trees. Thinking it might be his daughter, he ran toward it. As he got closer, he saw a young girl with long hair, just like his daughter. He tried to catch her, but no matter how fast he ran, the distance between them never changed. She led him deep into the woods to a small, abandoned hut with a flickering light inside. The father stepped inside and saw a horrific sight. His daughter's body was hanging from the ceiling. He fainted instantly. When he woke up, he saw his daughter standing right in front of him. She looked perfectly normal. "Father, go home," she whispered. He cried, "Mother, why won't you come with me?" She replied with a hollow sadness, "I cannot. I am dead, Father. My body is lying over there." She pointed to a corner where her cold corpse now lay on the floor. She begged him, "Go home and arrange for my funeral and prayers. If you don't, I will be trapped here forever." The father returned home and did exactly as she asked. But the pain was too much. Weeks later, he went to her grave at night to find peace. To his shock, he saw her sitting near the headstone. "Father, why are you here again?" she asked. The father sobbed, "You said everything would be fine after the funeral. Why are you still here?" The girl sighed, "Because I didn't die a natural death. I must remain here. But please, don't come back. You have a wife and sons to care for. Forget me. That was the last time he ever saw her. He realized that some souls are destined to walk the thin line between this world and the next, forever watching over the ones they left behind. I am someone who doesn't fear much, except for snakes and dogs. When I visit my village, I often stay awake until 3 a.m. One night, after a power cut, I decided to take a walk. I was playing my flute, letting the music fill the silent night air. Around midnight, I reached a beautiful pond surrounded by a dense forest of over 50 rows of trees. The moonlight was breathtaking, turning the water into a silver mirror. I leaned against a tree and continued playing my flute, lost in the beauty of the night. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound from deep within the forest, the rhythmic clinking of anklets. I stopped playing and listened. The sound was coming from the thickest part of the woods, but after a few moments, it stopped. A cold, heavy feeling of unease washed over me. I decided to leave, but before I did, I glanced at the pond. My heart nearly stopped. Reflected on the surface of the still water was the shadow of a person. It was standing right where I was, but it didn't move when I moved. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The reflection was still there. I looked around me. There was no one. I looked at the ground. I didn't even have a shadow under the moonlight. Yet there was a human shape floating in the water. Suddenly, the reflection vanished. I began to walk away as fast as I could. As I reached the edge of the dark forest, I saw a figure in a white shroud standing among the trees. The figure raised a pale hand and gestured for me to come closer. I didn't look back. I ran with everything I had. Just as I reached the village road, a dog began to bark and chase me from behind. The combination of the entity and my primal fear of dogs was too much. I reached my front door and let out a scream that brought the whole family outside. My grandfather didn't ask any questions. He immediately made me bath and used a traditional ritual with heated iron to cleanse the evil eye from me. To this day, I never play my flute near the water after midnight. Some melodies are meant for the living, but others attract the attention of those who no longer have a shadow. My uncle, Rafik, had a lifelong passion for fishing. He especially loved fishing at night, often sitting alone by the river under the starlight. One evening, while walking toward his usual fishing spot, he met another fisherman on the path. The stranger was carrying a fishing rod and walking silently. Rafik tried to make conversation, but the man was cold and distant. When asked where he lived, the stranger simply pointed toward the river and whispered, "I am a hunter. I don't just fish. I hunt." They reached the riverbank. It was a beautiful full moon night, and the water was unnaturally still. Not a single cricket was chirping. Even the stray dogs were silent. The stranger suggested they move further down the bank to a steeper area where the water was deep and dark. They sat together and cast their lines. For an hour, nothing happened. Rafik grew bored and suggested moving back, but the stranger suddenly stood up. Without taking off his clothes, he walked straight into the deep, churning water. Rafik watched in shock. The man submerged completely and didn't resurface for several minutes. Just as Rafik was about to call for help, the man's head popped out of the water. He climbed back onto the steep bank with impossible ease, holding a large, thrashing fish in his bare hands. Rafik was terrified. "How did you catch that with your hands?" he stammered. He began to recite prayers under his breath. The stranger let out a hollow, mocking laugh. "Prayers won't save you here," he said, his eyes glowing in the moonlight. "You can catch as many as you want tonight, but you cannot take them home. The catch belongs to me." Suddenly, Rafik felt a massive tug on his own rod. He pulled in a large fish, but in the excitement, he looked at his fish container. It was empty. The stranger had already taken his catch and was walking away into the thick, dark bushes without making a sound. Rafik didn't look back. He left his gear behind and ran all the way home, falling sick with a high fever that night. The next day, the village elders told him a truth. 25 years ago, a local fisherman had drowned in that exact spot while fishing alone at night. Since then, he returns every full moon to hunt with anyone who dares to share his spot. He doesn't want the fish. He just wants to remind the living that the river now belongs to him. I come from a family of brave men living along the banks of the famous river in Asia. We never believed in ghosts. I have walked through the darkest paths at midnight without a shred of fear. But one rainy night in 2007, everything changed. There was an old woman in our village, around 70 years old, who loved me like her own grandson. She was always seen walking with an ancient wooden stick, wearing thick, old-fashioned glasses and a white traditional dress. Whenever we met, she would pat my head and say, "Study hard, my son." She passed away, and 4 days later, her family organized a traditional funeral feast. I was returning from the market on my old bicycle. It was a pitch-black night, and the mud on the dirt road was thick and slippery. As I passed a massive tamarind tree near her house, I saw a figure standing in the shadows. I slowed down my cycle and asked, "Who is there?" No answer. I stopped, balancing my feet on the mud, just a foot away from the person. I turned my flashlight toward the person's feet. They were impossibly fair and spotless, untouched by the thick mud of the road. Confused, I raised the light to the face. My heart stopped. It was her. She was standing there with her wooden stick and those ancient glasses, smiling that same gentle smile. But her eyes, they were fixed on me, unblinking. I tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, but I couldn't look away. For 15 long seconds, we stared at each other in the dead silence of the night. Suddenly, terror took over. I slammed my feet on the pedals, but my cycle chain snapped instantly. I fell into the mud, scrambled up, and ran for my life. Later that night, I went back with a group of people and powerful torches. The road was empty. The next day, I visited her son and asked about her stick and glasses. We searched her entire room, every corner of the house, but those items were gone. They were never found again. To this day, whenever I pass that tamarind tree on a rainy night, I feel a cold breeze on my face. I can still see those glasses glistening in the dark and hear the faint tap of her stick on the ground. Some bonds are so strong that even death cannot break them. They just become a haunting memory.